welcome and thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to talk a bit about quality assurance and how to succeed in quality assurance in gaming industry, which sometimes also feels like surviving. We'll maybe come back to that a bit later, why it's also about surviving besides also succeeding. I'm from Metacore, the QA lead at Metacore Games, and today start with a brief introduction about myself, and then have a few words to say about the company that I work at. Then we'll talk a little bit about, I don't know how much background you people having QA, so we talk a little bit about what QA actually is, and then switch on to the beef of the presentation, and that is what is like the traits of an excellent QA specialist in the gaming industry. So I'm rather new in the gaming industry, like from a work point of view. I've been playing games since Boulder Dash, I think, on Commodore 64 back in the days. And about half of my career I've been actually in quality assurance, and the rest I've been doing quite much different things. I started off as a developer and realized that I'm not a good coder, so I went on to do other things. But since I joined gaming industry, and I've been working with QA in like testing other things like telecom systems or banking applications. It's been quite of a journey to see what the differences are between, or how gaming industry and quality assurance is actually quite different from other IT systems, basically. So, like I said, I'm from Metacore, and this is our mission. Our mission is to create mobile games that are played by millions of people around the world for decades to come. And Metacore as a company, it's quite new, but we have been growing quite rapidly. I joined Metacore in 21. I think we were like 40, 45 employees at that time. Today we are more than 180, and also as a business we've grown quite much over the years, and the growth continues, and I guess that's one reason why we're here, because we are also, of course, growing and recruiting more people. So, what is actually then quality assurance? I would say that most people think about quality assurance as a mission to find bugs, and this is when we talk about quality assurance and how like different metrics related to that. I think one of the key things is that we want to avoid bugs like that are found in production or in a live game. And one reason is, of course, that it doesn't look very nice for a player to have a game-breaking bug there. But also, one thing that is not that often considered is that actually the price of the defect, not only from reputation point of view, but also to fix a bug that is found in production, is much more expensive than fixing it early on. So we want to find the bugs, of course, before we go live, but we also want to do different activities that along the development process to actually prevent bugs from happening in the first place, and so forth. Another model this is very much simplified, and it's not 100% applicable for gaming, but it's basically when you develop any kind of software, you start with some kind of requirements. You make a high-level design about what you're supposed to do with the feature. You go into the different modules in the system, and then you do some coding, and then you test and ship the product. And from a quality assurance point of view, we quite often, especially in gaming, we talk about testing. And when we talk about testing, we really talk about it as you play the game. That's one part of quality assurance, but quality assurance covers basically the whole thing, that you are supposed to be the way you do things, the way you define the requirements, the way you do the design and everything else. That the whole process is basically quality assurance. And that's maybe one thing that is particular, especially in gaming, based on my experience. And that the fact is that we talk a lot about, like I said, that we talk a lot about testing. But then we talk about that you play the game as a player. But that doesn't mean that that's the only testing that you actually should be doing. You should also do lower level testing and even on the code level to basically prevent bugs or find bugs and correct them before. So actually testing the game as a player it should be just the tip of the iceberg in the process. There was a mentioning about different levels of testing, and I don't know how familiar people are with that, but basically you develop a software. It consists of several different modules. Of course, you should test all these different modules before you put them together to form a bigger thing. So unit testing is when you test the smaller pieces of the software. When you put the pieces of software together, you should be doing some kind of integration testing to make sure that these pieces are working together. And in the end, you basically test the whole thing in system test or UI testing. And in gaming, I think this is quite often, like I said, neglected, that you think that it's the only way of testing is to test the whole game, basically. Quite often in QA, traditionally you talk about a testing pyramid, which this is the way that it's supposed to be in theory, that you should have the lower level testing in place, and that's basically the foundation from a testing point of view. That makes the foundation of the system that you are developing. Then you should do the integration testing, and the UI testing is really just scratching the surface. So this is how it is in theory, and it comes from the fact why we talk so much about the need of unit testing is because testing on a lower level is much more reliable, and testing on the top level is quite cumbersome and slow. So this is the theory. In practice, like I worked in banking, for instance, before I joined the gaming industry. The pyramid looks like this. So we still talk a lot about, or still a huge amount of effort is put on testing actually the end user, from the end user point of view. But in gaming, I would say that this looks maybe even more like this, that you actually, the unit testing is just a small part of the activity. Integration testing might be a bit bigger, but the UI testing, a lot of the focus is on the UI testing. And this is something that at least I'm on a mission to basically change, that we should make the pyramid more look like a pyramid and not like flipped pyramid in a sense. And another thing with, like we have typically when we talk about testing, like why we suffer so much in testing is that this is basically how you develop. You do the requirements, you specify something, you implement, and then in the end you test. Of course, with like in the new modern world with agile methods and everything, this is a more iterative process, but still the development consists of different phases. And this is how it is. Like in plans, you have always equal amount of time reserved for everything, but in practice, what happens is that usually specification is somewhat neglected maybe, requirements are vague, you focus a lot of time on the implementation, and then you do the testing, and then shit hits the fan, and you are really short on time to actually finish the activities before you ship it out. I don't know if anybody who has been working in quality assurance knows this, that in any project plan, all the other like milestones can move, but the release date quite seldom moves. So QA really has a back wall, and we can't basically, we just have to live with the delays always. Which comes to the fact that is how it is, but what we can do to prevent this is that we actually also do the lower level testings and things in place, have things in place so that the short time that is given for testing is actually focused on finding the nasty things. And like I said, I was new to gaming. I've been testing banking applications. I've been testing telecom applications and health tech systems and so forth. And I think gaming is games are by far the most difficult thing to test. I'm not saying that developing games that's equally difficult, but I would say that in testing in particular, I mean, games are hugely complex things to actually test. And why is this then the case? One thing which is a positive thing, of course, but it also brings a certain aspects to this work is that games are built with passion. I mean, I've never seen anybody who is passionate about the banking application, but I've seen quite many people who are passionate about games, which means that there's even more tendency to polish the stuff and have delays and do major rechanges quite far in the end of the process. But passion, of course, is a good thing. but it has certain trends as well as a result. Another thing is that like games are each player is basically playing the game quite in a unique way. I don't know how Rockstar pulled off to test the Red Dead Redemption, because I mean that's like amazing. It works amazingly well, and it's so you can do so many different things. And like in our company with Merge Mansion, we have like 50 million downloads of the game, and I think most of the players that we have played the game. Nobody has played it exactly the same way. So you do things in a different way, which results in quite the hard work to actually within testing to simulate all the different players that you have playing the game. Then with games we have a lot of data, and of course data is also a good thing. But when you like look under the hood, like we can have a player who played the game a half a year ago, hasn't played it since. We have released many updates along the way, and then the player comes back to the game, and we need to make sure that his data is basically working as well as anybody other player's data. So there's a lot of stuff like data migrations and things that need to be considered also when you do your testing. And also related to the unique player journeys, you have, I mean, like a infinite amount of permutations, how you can do things in games. Not maybe infinite, but close to infinite amount of ways that you can do things in a game. And like in traditional, for instance, the banking applications, usually banking applications are so that you have some process that you do, a loan application, and when you test the loan application, you start the loan application and finish the loan application, end of story. But games start somewhere, but games never basically end. Like with Merge Mansion, you can play the game for 2 years, at least. Then games are like a lot of focus is on the user interface and the UI. You have all these fancy animations that should work okay. You have like art that should be layered in a correct way and so forth. And this is also quite unique to any other IT system. I mean, there's not much other like systems there where you have so much focus on the user interface. And then if we talk about like mobile gaming, I think couple of things that make mobile gaming also quite unique is that like a AAA game, Red Dead Redemption, for instance, they put a lot of work, of course, during the development process. Then they launch the game, and then most of the work, of course, you patch the game and so forth, but most of the game is done before launch. Whereas in mobile games, you basically you have a prototype, you try it out and see that does this work, do players like this game, and then you launch the game globally, and then you basically start to work. Like in the Merge Mansion case, for instance, it has been live for 3 years, and I would say that quite much of the stuff that we have today in the game wasn't there 3 years ago. So you start the development of the game when you launch it, which means that there's a lot of like technical depth and things to consider when you develop your game. And also the release cycles are really fast. Like you can have a monthly release cycle. Basically every month you make a release. So every month you have a lot of new content that you need to develop, you need to test, and you need to ship it out. And once you have shipped it out, you can start the next release, which comes a month later. So things are going really fast forward. Also, one thing that I think is especially in mobile games, because like I said, that the work starts when you basically launch the game. So you always have an opportunity. This is something that people don't often consider, that you shouldn't maybe when you make a new feature to the game, you have a window, you are supposed to release it in the next release, but basically there's also a window open to continue working on it along the way. So it doesn't need to be perfect for this release, but we can tune it basically over and over in future releases as well. Then with mobile games, you can have a player playing the game in Finland on the latest iPhone, or you can have a player playing it from Philippines behind 2 VPNs or firewalls with an old Android device. So you have like different hardware, you have different resolutions, different screen and so forth, and geography. So it brings a lot of challenges that you basically, when you test the game, you're supposed to make sure that the game works in both of these cases and every million cases that is in between them. So it brings a lot of extra work to QA. So if testing games is difficult, almost impossible, I mean, is it possible to do it then at all? And I think like what makes a person who wants to work in QA, what are the sort of traits that make a QA specialist a great QA specialist in gaming? First of all, like I said, games are built with passion. I mean, if there's some fancy animation, somebody put it there because they think that this is great. So when you test it and it doesn't work, you should have some diplomacy skills when you talk to the person, because he might have put his heart and soul in that. In traditional IT, I don't think that people are passionate about the buttons in a mobile bank, for instance. But in gaming, passion is there, so you have to be very diplomatic when you find out that things are not working as you think they are working. Also, like I said, with the pyramid, for instance, I think if things have been done in a certain way before, it doesn't mean that it's the best way to do things. So a QA specialist should be always there, have the courage to basically challenge that, okay, is this the best way that we do it? Or could we actually do some changes to make things a bit better in the future? And this is something that we have been talking with the team at Metacore quite much, that the importance of using the word no. I mean, you have passionate people who have built a feature who is really, really nice, but in your opinion, there's something wrong with it. So it's like quite important to bring that up to the table. And if somebody thinks that yes, we can do it, and you know that testing this feature will take, like the 2 weeks that you have basically in the schedules have been allocated for you to test this thing, and if you think that 2 weeks is not enough, then say no. And sometimes, of course, you can say also the word yes, but it's important also to use the word no. I don't know actually how I ended up working in QA, but I think it spans back to my childhood when I wanted to open all the boxes of the radios and everything and find out how they are working, and I think that is directly applicable to quality assurance as well. I think you need to have this sort of curiosity to understand how things are working, and opening the Pandora's box and showing up to the world all the terrible things that are in it. It's part of the job, and in particular, when you have a new feature in a game, a game designer has made a new feature, and he's most likely tested the normal path. That he basically assumes that this is the way that the player is supposed to play this feature. That in quite many cases, I would say like 80% of the cases, the positive or vanilla flow basically works. So what you as a QA are supposed to try to understand is that, okay, yes, this is the way that we think that the player will play this feature, but what if the player plays it in a different way? What are the different ways that I can actually try to break the game? Basically try to simulate weird player behavior in finding out all the different ways that the feature can go wrong. Quite often, what we also do is that you basically you start off a feature, you close the game or restart your phone and then see if it works again. If you can basically continue the feature in the same way. So it's quite important to try to break the game and think outside the box. That how will people play this game and make sure that those sort of alternative flows are working correctly. And since, like I said, that the end date of quality of the testing phase can never move, and you are always like you have always much more work to do than you can actually do, and it's otherwise also pretty hectic hectic activity that you are doing as a QA in a game project. I think the most important help that you have available or the shoulder that you can cry to is your colleague. So it's quite important to use that as a actively get the support from your fellow QAs. Even if you are testing a feature and somebody else is testing another feature, your colleague might have good ideas about how you could approach this testing, or there might be a problem that he can help you in identifying, or he has experience from the previous release and can basically give you good directions of what direction you should be going forward. Then you have quite often these situations that you find this bug that you think is basically not very nice and you want it corrected, but then people are saying that no, this is not that important, so we don't need to fix it in this release. So it can be a bit hard for you that you found this bug that you think is nasty, but we don't have time to fix it. It's important to also understand the big picture. I mean, still, like mobile gaming, it's maybe brutal to say, but it's a business. So you can't solve all the problems, you can't avoid all the problems, but you need to basically fix the things that make a difference for the player. Like game breaking bugs, of course, you have to fix, but if some animation is not 100% correct, we might be able to live with it and maybe fix it later or leave it as it is. So as a job, basically, you're expected to have an eye for the details, but also you need to keep in mind that you can't forget the big picture as well. We talk a lot about instincts that because, like I said, that big part of the work is actually to try to find these ways that player can play the game, which is not maybe the expected way to play. So you need to basically, if you have an instinct that okay, maybe I could do it like this, trust it, try it out, and be courageous to basically do things that nobody expects you to do. Then of course sometimes your instincts were wrong, and something slips out to production. We might have a bug on live players that is not very nice. What we can do is that yes, not go to the blame game, but basically try to learn from that for the future. That if making one mistake is totally human, use that experience as a sort of a thing to learn for the future and avoid that next time, basically. This maybe sounds very negative, but it's actually one important thing is to also to stay positive. So even if the work is by nature, you're trying to break the game, you're trying to find the problems instead of enjoying the fancy features that you have. It's quite important to try to stay positive as well. And most importantly, I think it's about having fun, because like I said, that I started as a kid to break or open all the radios and stuff that we had at home to understand how they're working. And some people just are like this, and some people enjoy basically opening the Pandora's box and finding all the problems. And I've actually noticed that most of the QAs, if things go well and there are no bugs, we get pretty bored. Either we think that we have failed, basically we have missed something, or then the developers have just done a too good job. So we enjoy the times when things are totally screwed up, and I think that's part of the having fun. That it's actually fun to see when things go wrong, which sounds terrible, but that's part of the job. So if you basically possess these things and you are not you understand development, but you don't maybe enjoy the coding, or you can't draw like art on a computer like myself, somehow we just find our way into QA. And we've also noted that it's a sort of within the team we talked quite much that we have this some sort of a perversion in our head that we actually enjoy this stuff, and some people do. So if you possess anything of these things and and you think that this would be actually a fun job to do, then I highly recommend to try it out. That was my last slide. Questions? Or do we have time for questions?
Yes. Maybe we can start with this question from online.
Oh, man.
Okay, so Mostafa has two questions, one and a follow-up one. So he says he has been for almost a year now in the games industry and has good enough experience, but what are your tips for someone to stand out more as a junior and also to showcase their skills as a QA? And how can someone who is outside from the EU prove themselves as an ideal candidate for relocation, even though they are a junior?
It's quite hard to get into the gaming industry. I mean, trying is one thing that you have to apply, get a chance to talk in the interviews. And I think the most important thing is to, like these things that I showed, like that, try to express your curiosity. And also, doesn't hurt to build your technical skills. So even if you're not supposed to be a coder, it's good to understand coding. It's good to understand, like if your project is working on Unity, or the company that you apply for is working with a Unity game, learn Unity and all these things. So it makes good stuff to understand, basically.
Let's go with an on-site one and then we can go back to online.
All right, yeah, hi. I also came from outside of the games industry, but back-end and then like web tools development. And seeing how the games industry does QA and testing has always been really weird to me, because like it's this waterfall approach of like at the end of the process, while in regular software development, it's like part of the team and empowering people who do their parts to already test and like test it themselves before they get it in the product. So I want to get your perspective on that of like, do you see that changing? Do you see that as a problem really? Because like being this like gatekeeper at the end is like setting you up for conflict almost?
Yes, I see that definitely, and I recognize that completely. And I think it might be, I mean, gaming industry is still fairly new. I mean, if you compare to telecom, for instance, it has been there for ages. So these companies have been building these systems already for a long time. But like one thing that I think is important to start to bring up, that QA wants to be involved already earlier. Like when you do start to design the features and you specify them, I mean, involve QA there. They might not be able to contribute that much, but at least they know what is happening, so that when you are in the end and you are supposed to test, you know how it's supposed to work. But also, like I think it is a sort of waterfall model in gaming, but it's a very iterative waterfall model. So this thing just runs around quite much. But I think that mostly is running between the design and the coding. Basically, they are iterating really fast, but QA is not part of that iteration, and that is something that we need to do.
Hello? Okay, now it's working. So we can go with another online one. Samuel is asking, he says, I'm not a QA person, but do you have any suggestion on how a QA person can create a portfolio that shows off their QA experience?
It's much harder than for a developer, but I think like it's more maybe about being able to communicate. I mean, when you are not part of when you're, for instance, studying, and I mean, if you can show your interest in like breaking the Skyrim game or breaking some other game, that you have this sort of a mindset that you're trying to break also the games that are available in PlayStation Store. Try to bring that up to your when you have an interview or stuff like that. That's the only way, because we can't basically have a QA portfolio, because that comes when you actually do the work. All right.
If I can ask you the last one, if we collect some of the questions, we got a lot in the online, and send it to you.
Yep. And I will be hanging around here for a while, so if anybody wants to come and talk about QA, then I'm totally up for it. Kiitos.